And 6 months later, they all look at each other and say, how did this happen? How did we get into this stupid war? And they say, how do we get out? The problem is, by then there's no way to get out, because so many emotions have been built up, everything has been built up. And we continue to slaughter each other. It's been gigantic amounts of money. Of course, a few years later, they all say, why did we do that? Why didn't we stop it? If you can figure out the answer to that, Danny, you'll save the world. But the problem is, this always happens. So they always say, how do we get out? How did we get into this stupid war? Now, how do we get out? And the problem is, there's no way out until you just kill a lot more people and spend a lot more money. We're human beings. You solve the problem, please. Please solve the problem. Well, I will tell you, I do own gold. I do own silver. I've never sold any of my gold and silver. I first bought my first gold in 1971, before you were born. It was illegal in those days for Americans to own gold, but I bought some, and I still have it, and I continue to buy silver and gold. I hope that I'm smart enough for my children to have my gold and silver someday. I have sold nearly all of my shares. I still own shares in China, and I still own shares in Uzbekistan, but I've sold everywhere else. And I'm sitting here with a lot of cash in US dollars, mainly not in other currencies, and I'm trying to figure out what to do next. So I will have to ask Danny, what do I do next? Well, I guess for silver, it's a long-term triple top, First went to
Right.
50 back in 1980, etc. It's now making new highs. I'm not selling my silver. If it goes down, I hope I'm smart enough to buy more. I mean, Danny, I'll repeat, I want my children to own my gold and silver someday. If the world comes to an end, I'll have to liquefy my gold and silver. But I hope that doesn't happen in my lifetime. I do own gold, I do own silver, but as I say, I've sold nearly all my shares around the world because for one of the few times in my life, nearly every market is making all-time highs. Danny, that has rarely happened. And in my experience, when everybody's having a good time, it's time to look out the window and say, wait a minute, something's wrong. Something is going to go wrong. Not wrong right now, but everybody's happy. Well, Washington will tell you that everything is great and you don't have to worry. It's different now. It's different now. Be careful when you hear it's different now, Danny. But they will tell you you don't have to worry anymore. We figured out the answer. We know how to solve the problems. However, the U.S. market, and I'm mainly going to talk about the U.S. market. The U.S. market's been going up since 2009 or 2008. I should be really precise. That's the longest in American history. Never. And I'm older than you, so it's the longest in your lifetime too. Never has the market gone up so long, so many years. Trump will tell you, see, we've solved the problem. Everything is okay now. Okay, I'm worried. I'm not selling short yet, I will tell you, Danny, quickly. I'm not selling short yet because I don't see the wild hysteria that these things usually turn into. Looks like I sold too soon, but I'm not selling short yet.
Global stock markets have reached rare territory, simultaneous all-time highs across major regions. Historically, such moments often signal late-cycle exuberance rather than sustainable growth. The U.S. market, in particular, has climbed for an unusually long stretch, longer than any previous bull run. When nearly everyone is confident, seasoned investors tend to grow cautious. It's not panic they anticipate, but the subtle shift from optimism to euphoria that often precedes trouble. While no extreme mania is visible yet, the ingredients are forming. Many investors are sitting in cash, waiting for the next clear direction, aware that cycles always turn eventually.
In my experience, there comes a time, well, first to repeat, every market in the world is making all-time highs, or nearly every market. And when the U.S. market's been going up longer than it ever has in American history, but usually when things like this happen, there comes a time when it gets really hysterical. I don't see hysteria yet in the U.S. I do see things getting happy and crazy, but I don't see wild hysteria yet. Usually these things end in wild hysteria. If and when that happens, I hope I'm smart enough to sell short. Yes, gold is, quote, an unproductive asset, so is silver, for that matter. But Danny, I've been around long enough to know that people have always, throughout history, thought of gold and silver as a valuable thing. You remember Jesus Christ? He was sold for 30 pieces of silver, because even then, even there, silver was very valuable, and it still is. People all over the world, it doesn't matter where you go, if you give them silver, they know you've given them something valuable. If you give them gold, they know. So, and many people who tell you it's crazy, the gold has no value, blah, blah, blah. Fine. Let them tell you. Let them tell me. I still own gold and silver, and I hope I'm smart enough to buy more if they go down. For whatever reason, Danny, throughout history, or at least most history, gold and silver have been considered valuable by human beings. I own gold and silver. I own U.S. dollars as well. Now, the U.S. dollar is a very flawed currency. There is no question, Danny. I mean, the United States, oh my gosh, and I'm an American citizen and taxpayer. But the U.S. dollar, the U.S. has never, no country in world history has ever been so deep in debt as the U.S. is. And it's getting worse every day, Danny. I know enough history to know that every country that gets into this kind of situation eventually has horrible problems. And this is 2025. In 1925, Britain was the richest, most powerful country in the world. 50 years later, this is not a typo, 50 years later, Britain was bankrupt. IMF had to bail them out. Margaret Thatcher was elected because Britain went bankrupt. Margaret Thatcher saved Britain. But what really saved Britain was the year Margaret Thatcher took power, 1979, was the year the North Sea oil started flowing. So, Danny, if you give me the largest oil field in the world, I'll give you a very, very good time. And all your friends, everybody you know, will all have a good time. And that's what happened to Britain. Thatcher took credit, but it was the North Sea oil that saved her.
Currencies can strengthen or collapse depending on political choices, debt burdens, and public trust. The U.S. dollar remains widely used, but concerns are rising over unprecedented national debt levels. History shows that financially overstretched empires, from the British in the 20th century to countless nations before them, eventually face harsh adjustments. Meanwhile, gold and silver have weathered every currency crisis humanity has recorded. While critics call them unproductive, nations and individuals alike continue to rely on them when paper money loses credibility. In a world increasingly shaped by fiscal experiments and short-term political decision-making, metals offer a form of independence from policy errors.
Sure, if we elect the Tooth Fairy as president of the U.S., all our problems will be solved. So you call up the Tooth Fairy and tell her she should run for president, and everything will be fine. I repeat, the UK became the richest, most powerful country in the world. 50 years later, it was bankrupt. Literally, the IMF had to come in and bail them out. Margaret Thatcher took credit for it, but it was the North Sea oil that saved Britain. And Britain is now going to have economic debt problems again. But I'm an American citizen, Danny, and I'm telling you what's happened in the US. I mean, I look at the numbers and I say to myself, can they not add? Can they not subtract in Washington? They probably cannot. Most of them are not very smart. That's why they go to work for the government. But the numbers are staggering. Just this year alone, the numbers are staggering. And I don't think anybody, or very few people in Washington, even know how astonishing the numbers are. And I know, well, I've read enough history to know that this always ends badly.
Well, they're now saying the press secretary said yesterday that they're not even going to release the October jobs numbers now because they're citing that the government shutdown contaminated the numbers in some way. So, I mean, we've gotten to the point where they're just not going to show us the numbers anymore, at least for October.
Does that sound good to you? Doesn't sound good to me. I'm an American taxpayer, voter, citizen like you. It doesn't sound good for any of us. I certainly understand that they want to keep the numbers quiet, but I know it's not good for us, not good for anybody.
While owning physical gold and silver is straightforward, mining stocks introduce a different universe, one filled with volatility, leverage, and potential for outsized gains. The challenge lies in identifying the few companies capable of thriving through commodity cycles. When metals rise, miners can multiply those gains due to their fixed operating costs. Yet this path requires research, discipline, and an understanding of geology, management, and national regulations. For many investors, holding bullion is simpler. But for those willing to study the sector, mining equities have historically produced extraordinary fortunes during precious metal upcycles, particularly when discovered early.
No, not at all. Well, Jim, so I want to get your thoughts on. We've talked about gold and silver. We've talked about equities, but I also want to get your thoughts on the gold and silver equities. Are you positioned any at all into the gold and silver mining stocks?
I am not, partly because I'm lazy. That takes work. There's some staggering fortunes to be made if you can get the right silver stocks or the right gold stocks. But that takes work. And for me, it's simpler just to buy the gold, to buy the silver. You should have some silver under your bed. You should have gold in your closet. Everybody should. But if you're smart enough, diligent enough to figure out the stocks, I mean, my gosh, you'll make much, much more money if you buy the right stocks. Because then you get leverage, huge leverage, if you buy the right stocks.
And then what about platinum? I know you collect the yellow and white metal. What about the other white metal, platinum? Platinum at one point was actually valued higher than gold in history. Now it's about a little under half the price of gold. Do you anticipate platinum getting some of that market share back in the metal space?
Well, you should throw in palladium too. Platinum and palladium are certainly alternatives, viable alternatives. I don't own either at the moment. I have in the past, but no, those are certainly viable alternatives. But when push comes to shove, Danny, in my experience, if you walk down the street in India, go to India, go to a market in India. They all know what gold is. They all know what silver is. But if you said to them, here we got some platinum, they'll probably turn around and go the other way. Because platinum and palladium, yes, you and I know, and many know, have great value. But in the backwoods, many people never heard of platinum and palladium, but they all know about gold.
Not all valuable metals enjoy universal recognition. Platinum and palladium, once valued above gold, serve vital roles in industries such as automotive catalysts and emerging clean energy technologies. Yet they lack the cultural familiarity of gold and silver, especially in developing regions where physical metals are tied to savings traditions. While these alternative metals may offer long-term opportunities, their global demand relies more heavily on industrial trends. Gold and silver, by contrast, hold emotional and historical significance that transcends borders. In uncertain times, people instinctively turn to what they know, and across most of the world, that remains the classic pair of precious metals.
I mean, Danny, they're politicians. They want to do anything they can to make people happy. They look for easy answers. Now, a 50-year mortgage is great. Your payments go down a lot. In the end, of course, you pay much, much, much more in interest payments in the end. So many people say, my mortgage payments have been cut by a lot. That's great. Well, that's short-sighted if you ask me. But no, it's one of those gimmicks that politicians love because it makes a lot of people happy, seemingly happy, and everybody's fine, except the people who can add. The people who can add and multiply and subtract realize what's going on. Oh, of course everybody who knows a little bit of economics knows that when you print a lot of money, it has always led to inflation. But most of these guys who work for the government don't care because they're assumed that they'll be gone by the time it gets to be a serious problem, and it won't affect them. It'll affect you, it'll affect me, but they think that it won't affect them because there's enough time, and obviously there is a lag effect when you print a lot of money. That's what these guys count on. That's why they work for the government, Danny. They look for the easy answer. They look for the simple, easy answer. It's not good for you, your children, anybody's grandchildren, but it's good for them. All I know is it's always led to clashes, always, throughout history. And yes, it doesn't have to happen. Of course it doesn't have to happen. There's no reason for Americans to shoot Russians or Russians to shoot Germans or any of it. No reason for the Chinese to get involved, except for the fact that we're all human beings and we always have gotten angry. Somebody will come along and say, it's not our fault, it's those horrible foreigners. It's those evil foreigners that are causing the problems. We are all good, God-fearing, honest American citizens. We haven't done anything wrong. It's the foreigners. But likewise, in other countries, they say the same thing. They say it's all the evil Americans, the greedy Americans. This is the way the world has always worked. We're all human beings. Oh, yes, I can tell you it's all crazy. But I know that we're all human beings, and I know what has always happened in the past.
Do the BRICS nations trust each other? Go ahead.
Everybody should watch your show, listen to your show to avoid all this.
I can't disagree with you there.
Hooray. Yes, you're asking great, insightful, perceptive questions. You think they know that in Washington? You think they know that in London, Tokyo? They're all bureaucrats. Throughout history, they get angry at each other. They don't know why. They have to get angry with other people. You have to blame your problems on the foreigners. You don't think that the people in Japan and the government are going to say, it's our fault. We have made mistakes. Oh, vote for the opposition. Get rid of us because we've made mistakes. That's not the way governments work. That's not the way politics has ever worked. Doesn't matter who you are. Again, if this were, 2020, if this were 1910, the British, the German, everybody was very happy. The royal families used to vacation together. They used to intermarry. They used to have big summer parties together. A few years later, they were slaughtering each other in the trenches of Europe, cursing each other. And these were people who had been singing and dancing and having picnics just a few years before. They were great friends, intermarrying, no question. But A few years later, they were cursing each other, slaughtering each other in the trenches. And you know what happened? In 1914, they all said, this will be over by Christmas. By the way, they always say when the wars start, don't worry, the boys will be home by Christmas, or whatever the holiday they happen to talk about. They always say the troops will be home by Christmas. And 6 months later, they all look at each other and say, how did this happen? How did we get into this stupid war? And they say, how do we get out? The problem is, by then there's no way to get out, because so many emotions have been built up, everything has been built up. So they continue to slaughter each other. It's been gigantic amounts of money. Of course, a few years later, they all say, why did we do that? Why didn't we stop it? If you can figure out the answer to that, Danny, you'll save the world. But the problem is, this always happens. So they always say, how do we get out? How did we get into this stupid war? Now, how do we get out? And the problem is, there's no way out until you just kill a lot more people and spend a lot more money. We're human beings. You solve the problem, please. Please solve the problem.
History often repeats itself not because events are identical, but because human behavior rarely changes. Nations print money to ease short-term pain, politicians promise easy solutions, and societies search for someone to blame when problems escalate. Rising tension between powers, whether economic or military, typically emerges from financial stress rather than pure ideology. Wars throughout history began with confidence, only to spiral into chaos that leaders never intended. Today's world faces similar risks: rival blocs, debt pressures, and fading trust in institutions. Avoiding future crises demands acknowledging past patterns, yet humanity repeatedly struggles to do so, leaving investors to prepare individually.